Good evening, I'm Andrew Chang. Adrian is on assignment. Tonight, how provinces plan to reopen the ORs.
It's not a sense of you can just switch the light on and everything shuffles back into play.
The human and financial cost of putting surgeries on hold.
Well, he was really reluctant to give me a test.
What's in the way of more COVID-19 testing?
It brings me a big concern and depression, really.
Worries about a flood of business bankruptcies. And the win-win offer to the NHL from Canadian cities.
Every dollar is significant.
Saving the season, scoring the benefit. This is The National. Well, unbelievably tonight, there is more tragedy in Nova Scotia. The search for a missing 3-year-old boy in Truro is now a recovery effort. As Kayla Hounsell tells us, it is new pain for an area still reeling from so much loss.
From above and below, dozens of searchers desperately tried to find the missing boy, trying to avert yet another tragedy for Nova Scotia. It was not to be.
It's hard for our hearts to mend when we have all these tragedies unfolding in front of us, one after the other.
3-year-old Dillon was visiting his grandmother yesterday afternoon. She got distracted by a dog for only a moment, and then he wandered away. Police found first one of his rubber boots in a brook near the home, then the other further down near the mouth of the rushing Salmon River.
Truro and Colchester County are a very proud, strong community, very supportive. Everyone rallies together, but we've suffered a great deal of loss in the last couple of weeks.
Truro, Colchester County, where the boy was last seen. The same area where the mass shooting took place nearly 3 weeks ago, and where one of the 6 victims of the Canadian Armed Forces helicopter crash called home. Now, this lost toddler.
My first thought was, this world's breaking down.
The country's attention once again on a region already reeling.
It's hard. It's really hard.
People felt they had to try to help, some way, anyway.
I just thought I'd bring by some dry blankets if they needed them. It's kind of wet out here.
Despite the efforts of dive teams, search dogs, helicopters, and dozens of people using drones, thermal imaging, and an underwater camera, police say the search hasn't produced any new clues. Tonight, they switched from a rescue to a recovery operation.
My heart goes out to the parents and the family and everybody on the street, really.
One family's heartache felt deeply by a province already grieving so much loss.
So Kayla, what have you been able to learn about Dillon and his family?
Well, Andrew, this is obviously an incredibly difficult time for this family. I did have a chance to speak with his grandfather this afternoon, though. He described Dillon as just full of energy, loved to run and play. He had actually just turned 3 on April 17th. That's the day before the beginning of the mass shooting here in Colchester County. And, you know, his grandfather talked about that, too, how it has been such a terrible, terrible time here and how it all makes a person feel pretty helpless, Andrew.
Yeah, no doubt. Kayla, thanks very much. Okay, let's turn to the fight against COVID-19 in Canada and to a positive development in some Canadian hospitals. New plans to get elective surgeries back up and going. But the damage caused by the stoppage has been great and the cost will be paid for years. Renee Filipponi has the details.
Mary Melvaganam was lucky in March when her kidney cancer was caught early. But cancelled surgeries have left her in limbo.
It's already a stressful diagnosis because I know I have a chance to basically, if they caught it on time, to recover.
She's hopeful the news from BC today means answers soon. More than 30,000 surgeries were cancelled in BC because of COVID-19, ranging from cancer removal to cataracts.
They've been living in pain. Today, we'll start the process of relieving that pain for people who have been suffering because of the lack of elective surgeries.
But it's going to take time. Up to 2 years to clear the backlog in BC. This patient advocate says in a system with waitlists already, this level of backlog isn't surprising.
It's not a sense of you can just switch the light on and everything shuffles back into play.
More than 100,000 elective surgeries have been cancelled across Canada. PEI, with its low infection rate, has already started back up. But in places like Montreal, with higher rates of infection and understaffing, it will be much tougher. Today, Ontario and Manitoba unveiled its plans but with no specific timelines.
I would say it's going to be several weeks before we're able to get to that, before we can actually start performing those surgeries.
In that province, individual health authorities will determine if they can safely open up and whether they have the PPE to do it.
I have my pills here.
It can't come soon enough for this Ottawa mother with 2 ovarian cysts that need to be removed. She is still waiting to get on the wait list.
And right now, the pain is all the time.
Trying times for those waiting for surgeries to bring them comfort and possibly so much more. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
So let's see how Canada's coronavirus picture changed today. Just over 1,400 new cases reported, which continues this week's fairly flat trend. But here's a new benchmark in this country's pandemic. More than 1 million tests have now been administered for COVID-19. In the past week, as many as 30,000 tests were carried out each day. But Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, has said she believes provinces have the capacity to double that. Christine Birak shows us how a short supply leads to hard decisions.
For most Canadians, it's still not easy to get a test for COVID-19, even if you're showing symptoms.
It was body aches, it was fever, it was night sweats.
With a new baby at home, Max Walker went to see a doctor.
Well, he was really reluctant to give me a test, and it wasn't clear to me why he was refusing it.
Logistically, testing is complicated, but there is one simple reason why most Canadians are not being tested for the virus.
If we had all the tests in the world, there would be no debate that everybody would get tested. But we're simply not at that point.
The testing shortage isn't just Canada-wide, it's worldwide. Many countries are scrambling to buy the exact same chemicals. That's why each province and territory has to decide which groups get priority.
There have been issues with respect to changing guidelines in different provinces as the epidemic unfolds.
Initially, it was travelers. Right now, it's mainly people who are sick enough to be hospitalized and healthcare workers in order to protect hospitals and other essential services. But the rules for who can be tested are changing. As cities reopen, the virus will spread. More testing is needed in order to track it.
Alberta, for example, just in the past few days, has expanded their testing.
Those with milder symptoms will soon qualify for a swab, but with less physical distancing, more people will get sick.
Nobody ever likes to hear that there are more cases, but ultimately it comes down to this question of whether or not our healthcare system and our healthcare workers can handle them.
A lot of anxiety on my part.
Walker did end up getting a test. He didn't have the virus, not the result he expected, but he doesn't think the test was wasted. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, help is on the way for Canada's essential workers. Their pay is getting topped up after a $4 billion agreement between the federal and provincial governments. Here's Catherine Cullen with how it'll work and why it's so needed.
We've needed them all along, but COVID-19 is showing just how essential some workers are.
Hello everyone, it's Barb here, longtime professional home care personal support worker.
Barb Fletcher says she and her colleagues are helping keep people in their homes and out of hospitals and long-term care centers, but it's a demanding job.
There's a high turnover in especially in home care. And a lot of it is lack of respect, lack of proper wages, and the nature of the job.
Add to that, greater risk. This long-term care home in Ottawa announced today one of its employees has died from COVID-19.
For Canadians who are providing us with essential services so we can continue to keep our families safe and healthy.
The Prime Minister said today workers risking their health deserve more than minimum wage.
There are people who are tremendously economically vulnerable and vulnerable in other ways in our society who are extremely important to the functioning of our society.
Some provinces have already gone ahead with their pandemic pay plans, but they vary. For example, a grocery store worker in Quebec might be eligible, but not in Ontario.
We have confidence that the provinces will determine exactly how best to help Canadians in this time.
Even extra money isn't enough in the hardest hit provinces.
Raise your hand. Come help care for our elderly and our vulnerable.
Quebec has asked for volunteers to help, and in Ontario and Quebec, the military has been called into a growing list of long-term care facilities. But there is a bigger issue here that won't be solved by a temporary pay raise. Many of the people that Canadians are relying on the most are among those who make the least, something the Prime Minister says does need to change. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Small businesses are feeling the squeeze from their shuttered storefronts and strangled cash flow. With debts piling up, experts say a surge in bankruptcies is coming. Greg Rasmussen spoke to some owners who are close to the edge.
Shuffling products is the only activity left in this once bustling hair salon.
I've just spent 8 years of my life working around the clock to build a business for eventually have a retirement fund.
Bills piling up, a once unthinkable option is now on the table.
Even if I did declare bankruptcy tomorrow morning, I still would owe upwards of $600,000 on that house with no revenue to pay it.
See a lot of small business people where really their personal lines of credit, their credit cards, really are intermixed with their business. They really haven't separated them yet. They haven't gotten to that
Credit
stage.
counselors and bankruptcy trustees are being flooded with calls from people facing insolvency despite government support programs.
It brings me a big concern and depression, really.
This Vancouver bike rental shop depends on tourists. 20 employees have been laid off, and the owner has personally guaranteed his business loans. He says many entrepreneurs he knows are in the same boat.
Bankruptcy is going to be one of the options on the table for them as well as us. If we cannot go to the business by June 15, I don't think we can survive next season.
Formal bankruptcy filings usually show up months after an economic downturn.
So insolvencies are going to spike like crazy. People who have, put everything into their small businesses, are getting wiped out by something that was completely artificial, right? And it had nothing to do with how they did business.
With 10 years invested at this shop, it's hard to give up on a dream. One customer finally arrives, but he only needs his tire filled. But you can't run a business on air.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, another economic casualty of COVID-19, Google-affiliated Sidewalk Labs is pulling out of Toronto. The company had plans to build a sustainable smart city along an abandoned section of waterfront. But today, its CEO said, in part, it has become too difficult to make the 12-acre project financially viable without sacrificing core parts of the plan.
The Quayside site is still there. It is still valuable. We still own it, and it remains a key untapped area of the city's waterfront.
The company initially claimed the project would create 44,000 jobs and $4.3 billion in annual tax revenue. Well, a string of cell phone tower fires in Quebec has telecoms and police looking for a motive. Katie Nicholson has a look at the origins of some similar incidents in Europe.
Flames consume a cellular tower last Friday, the first of 7 such fires in Quebec. Today, a man and woman in their early 20s were charged with setting 2 of them.
The investigation is looking that they were responsible for 7 of the arson.
They pleaded not guilty. Whoever set the fires, the question is why. Europe might offer a clue. There, police are investigating a possible link between fire-damaged towers and 5G conspiracy theories.
I think it would be an astronomical coincidence if these 2 people allegedly decided to start burning masts for an unrelated reason. I'd be really shocked if it wasn't connected to that.
But what 5G actually does, it absorbs oxygen.
So what's it about? The idea being pushed by some is that the pandemic is caused not by a virus, but by radiation from 5G towers, amplified online by celebrities like Woody Harrelson, John Cusack, and musician MIA. But anti-5G sentiment was already alive and well in Quebec. Protesters took to the streets in January, and for some, the idea 5G COVID fears are behind the fires isn't a big leap.
It offers you something very concrete to blame, and the brain abhors a vacuum, and we like to have something that we can act against. I mean, this pandemic has made us feel very much anxious and at a loss for control.
Rogers says no 5G equipment was damaged in any of the fires, and TELUS says it is working with police to protect its infrastructure. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
In Russia, a shortage of protective equipment has healthcare workers sounding the alarm. Among them, 3 doctors who have since mysteriously fallen out of hospital windows. Some say the government is trying to silence critics, but as Chris Brown tells us, the reality may be even more telling.
Coronavirus is ravaging Russia. These gravediggers in protective gear buried COVID victims in St. Petersburg. An entire hospital in the city is now only treating healthcare workers who got sick on the job. 230 are patients, most of them doctors, said the announcer on state TV, underscoring frequent complaints that the lack of protective gear and a chaotic system is taking a crushing toll.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Косякин Александр Александрович.
The man on the left is Dr. Alexander Shulipov from the city of Voronezh.
Главный врач заставляет работать.
He tested positive for coronavirus, said his colleague, but the head doctor forced us to keep working. Shulipov later retracted the criticism in another video, but just 3 days later, he fell out of a hospital window. He survived, but fractured his skull. That makes him the 3rd Russian doctor to fall out of a window in 8 days. Elena Nepomunashkaya, a doctor from Siberia, and Natalia Lebedeva from Russia's Space Training Center were both killed in falls. What raises suspicions is that there's a long list of government critics who've also died after accidentally falling from windows.
They should say their bosses that everything is good.
Dr. Anastasia Vasileva runs an opposition-supported union for medical workers. She's been arrested for her activities, so she's hardly a friend of the government, but with the system overwhelmed, she says the doctors may have been driven to suicide.
It is the blame of system, of the destruction of health system in Russia.
Moscow's mayor today extended the lockdown to the end of the month as he visited a soon-to-open hospital, warning the pandemic is still spreading. Chris Brown, CBC News, Vancouver.
For the first time tonight, we are hearing directly from one of the 46 women suing Canadian fashion designer Peter Nygaard for sexual assault.
I was scared, but I was alone.
Next, what she says happened when she was just 19 years old. Also, the NHL's proposal to save the season and the Canadian cities already on board. Plus, a nurse on her way to work in the right place at the right time.
Took a deep breath and just ran up to the car.
I'm like, okay, this baby's coming whether we like it or not.
We're back in 2 minutes. For decades, Peter Nygaard has been Canadian fashion royalty, head of a clothing empire based in Winnipeg. He's also the defendant in a class action lawsuit. 46 women claim they were sexually assaulted by him. 18 are Canadian. Tonight, for the first time, one of them is speaking publicly. The Fifth Estate's Bob McEwen has her story and a warning. It contains disturbing details.
She says it happened here at Peter Nygaard's estate in the Bahamas in the summer of 1998. All the accusers in this case remain anonymous, so she's known as Jane Doe 16. According to her claim, she was 19 years old when her Bahamian tennis coach introduced her to Nygaard.
He kept referring to this person as chief or boss, and how he has an amazing tennis court on his property and that he would love to take me there to play tennis with him.
After a game with Peter Nygaard, she says he invited her to stay for dinner, then beyond.
He offered me my own cabana to stay for the rest of the summer. You know, he said I, could enjoy the beach and enjoy the tennis and that it would be great.
But she says it wasn't. According to the lawsuit, she was drugged, raped, and sodomized.
He put me down on the bed. He pulled my dress up and he held me down and he sodomized me. I didn't know what to do. I'd never felt that kind of pain before, and I was scared, but I was alone. And I couldn't stop it.
You mean he wouldn't stop?
No.
The lawsuit also claims Nygaard forced her to have sex with some of his friends.
And I did what he said. I just did what he said.
22 years later, She says she and the 45 other Jane Does are now trying to address the damage done to them by Peter Nygaard.
It's impacted my relationships, it's impacted my whole life. But I just want to be able to ease that pain a bit, knowing that someone didn't get away with it and that there was at least some justice, and I think the pain may lessen.
None of the allegations in the lawsuit have been proven in court. Through his lawyers, Nygaard absolutely and categorically denies the claims made by Jane Doe 16, adding she has probably been paid for false evidence. Bob McEwen, CBC News, Toronto.
2 men in Georgia have been arrested and charged in connection to the fatal shooting of an unarmed black man that has sparked outcry across the United States. A viral video captured the moment 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery was shot dead. Father and son, Gregory and Travis McMichael, are now facing charges of murder and aggravated assault. The pair say they believed Arbery was a burglar when they pursued him in a pickup truck back in February. The U.S. Justice Department is dropping its criminal case against Donald Trump's first national security advisor, Michael Flynn.
A crime cannot be established here. They did not have a basis for a counterintelligence investigation against Flynn.
Flynn was fired after lying to the FBI twice about his communications with Russian diplomats. He pleaded guilty in 2017, but the Justice Department now says it has evidence the FBI was trying to get Flynn to lie. A federal judge will decide whether to dismiss the case. And President Trump says he will be tested daily for COVID-19 after one of his valets tested positive for the virus.
I've had very little personal contact with this gentleman. Know who he is, good person, but I've had very little contact.
The valets are members of a military unit dedicated to the White House and often work very closely to the president and his family. Trump and Vice President Mike Pence have since tested negative for the virus. Well, ahead tonight, At Issue looks at what happens to those emergency benefits after the pandemic, also how the NHL could salvage the rest of the season, and the Canadian cities who are willing to play. And we'll have an infectious diseases specialist in to answer your COVID-19 questions. We've got one about swimming, one about seasonal allergies, also this one here. Do you think the vaccine will be mandatory? That's a toughie. We'll be back.
Hello, my name is Suzette. I'm the eldest daughter of an 81-year-old senior living independently in a seniors co-op. I was used to going to see my mom once or twice a week, but unfortunately, this has changed drastically. She's nervous, she's scared because I've been there, and she's asked me, "Why are you wearing a mask?" So I say to her, "Don't worry, Mama, there's something going on, but you're safe, you're okay." What keeps me up at night? The limitations of not having the flexibility to go and see my mom at any given sitting is very difficult because she needs me. I'm hoping and praying that soon this will, be over, because the reality is this is a very difficult time for all of us.
Physical distancing is really limiting social connections, especially for the estimated 4 million Canadians who live alone. And that challenge is even greater for those with mental health concerns. Tashana Reed shows us how some are finding ways to cope.
For Lucy Langford, escaping the confines of her condo has been necessary.
As somebody with a mental illness, sometimes my house isn't the safest place for me. Sometimes I really do need to get out.
Langford has been working to keep her mental health in check after being hospitalized in February. Since the pandemic, she sees her doctor and therapist in virtual appointments every week. But living alone hasn't been easy.
I don't know when I'm going to be able to get out and return to work or go back to school or see my friends.
Toronto psychotherapist Megan Watson says people who live alone with a mental health condition can face increased risks.
They might not even realize just how isolated, withdrawn, and socially kind of despondent they are.
Watson suggests setting daily routines, reaching out to loved ones, or seeking professional help if you're struggling.
I'm seeing a lot of people really feeling isolated, lonely, frustrated with, some of the restrictions.
It's been 47 days and counting since Dave Archibald has seen his fiancée, who lives across the border in the U.S. He's grateful to still have a job, but nights and weekends alone are hard for him.
I wondered, why am I here? What's my purpose to be here if I'm going to just be alone? And I got to a deep, dark place.
So Archibald reached out to a counselor for help. He's now on medication for depression and gets outside for walks every day.
I think I'm down 22 pounds. So if you want to look for a silver lining somewhere.
Langford also found ways to cope.
Right now, I'm grateful for the really little things.
She's rediscovered cycling and is connecting with friends online, and it's helping her feel less alone. Tashana Reed, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, let's get to your COVID-19 questions. Joining me tonight to share her knowledge, her advice, infectious diseases expert, Dr. Lenora Saxinger. Hello to you, doctor. And let's get started with question number one. And this is about the kind of prevailing wisdom of staying home when you're sick. Should people stay home from work even if they're just suffering from seasonal allergies? Or I suppose if you just think it's seasonal allergies.
That's a tough one, but I think there's a couple things that can help. One is seasonal allergies are often accompanied by a lot of itching, so itchy eyes, runny eyes. And if you have your classic symptoms that include itchy eyes, for example, especially if they respond to antihistamine medication, I think you're pretty good to go. If there's doubt, I think an excess of caution right now is reasonable. And if you ever do go out with symptoms you think are allergy and they seem to transition, it's not a bad idea to pay attention to who you've been around and where you've been to help with contact tracing. So, but I think if you think it's allergies and it responds to your allergy medication, you should be okay.
Okay. Next question. With cottage season starting to open up, is it safe to go swimming? Can the virus survive in open water?
Yeah, that's come up before, and I think there's really no evidence that we would expect virus to be transmissible in water, just sheerly by the large volume of water that you're looking at, and because it's mostly a respiratory infection. So I think people should feel comfortable going in the water at a lake, especially as long as they can maintain their distancing on the way in and out.
Would you say that applies to just a regular swimming pool as well?
Swimming pools worry me a little more just because of the changing room situation. If that can be maneuvered so that you don't have to stand too close to people, I think swimming pools are also fine.
Okay, interesting. Last question's a hard one. Do you think the vaccine will be mandatory?
Ooh, that is an interesting one. I guess the idea of a mandatory vaccine would have to be on the table because this is a very considerable public health threat that's changed the lives of everyone in the world over the past few months. And so I think if we were seeing that the vaccine uptake of a safe and effective vaccine wasn't adequate to get to the level of herd immunity, that would have to be discussed. I think that would be an important thing to do because we would all like to get back to normal.
Right, because what would the consequence be if it's like the flu vaccine where you don't have everyone who gets it?
If you don't get adequate, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns around a vaccine, but I think if we don't get a level of vaccination within the community to get to a level where the virus can no longer transmit easily on a kind of endemic, constant basis, then there's not that much point in having the vaccine because you will still have people at risk and people who don't respond to the vaccine that you want to protect as well. So I think that it would be really important to try to define how many people we need to have get the vaccine, and if we're not getting there, we'd have to look at the measures that are important for public health.
Dr. Saxinger, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And as always, if you've got questions, send them our way on Instagram at CBC The National or email us at covid@cbc.ca. And ahead tonight, the new parents who made it to the hospital but did not make it inside.
And I'm like, okay, this baby's coming whether we like it or not.
We'll hear from them and the nurse who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But after the break, Rosie's here with Adishu.
Andrew, tonight we are looking at how this crisis has changed the way governments treat essential and vulnerable Canadians, but also asking, can temporary fixes turn into permanent ones? Chantal, Andrew, and Althea will join all of us right after this break.
once we get through this, there will be plenty of time to talk about what the longer term looks like, what the future of Canada looks like, what is needed for various sectors, for various Canadians. We've seen a whole bunch of new needs popped up that we had not paid much attention to over the past years, like the plight of most vulnerable workers.
Ottawa and the provinces are coming together to increase wages for those essential workers. It's the latest measure to help Canadians during the crisis. But as you heard from the Prime Minister there, it has also exposed some real problems. So what happens after these benefits get rolled back? It's Thursday, and I'm here with At Issue. Chantal Hébert joins us, Andrew Coyne, and of course, Althea Raj. Good to see everybody. Let's start with that deal today between the federal government and the provinces that is a cost-sharing deal. How do you think at this stage this crisis changed the way governments in particular view what is essential work, the people that we probably don't talk about enough who are out there every day doing those things? Start with you, Andrew.
Well, I don't know if it's been fundamentally transformed. This is a particular situation. For example, people working in the long-term care homes who are working at several homes. And we've seen that that's been at least identified as a potential problem in terms of spreading the disease. So they've been told they can only work at one. Well, that's a major cut in their pay if something wasn't done. So there are particular situations here. Also, people are facing heightened risks in the current situation. But ultimately, the wages we have a functioning labor market where we will at some point in which supply and demand will still be dictating wages. And I'm not sure that necessarily can or should change in the long run. But in the short term, we've got particular situations and particular problems to be identified. They're going to have a hell of a time trying to figure out exactly who qualifies and who shouldn't. And they've left a lot of that to the provinces. But it's still going to be, I predict, a continuing issue for them in deciding who should qualify for this and who shouldn't.
Well, and also, Chantal, it raises the issue of what happens after. I mean, you could say many of these people have been underpaid for forever. And so how do you go back to not having this top up, or does that ever reverse itself? I don't know.
I agree with Andrew that it's circumstantial and that we have a functioning labor market in this province, for instance, that was dealing with labor shortages that should have driven up wages even without top-ups. Where we go from there, I think it would be probably an error to come out of this and say, well, here's our solution for long-term care is to pay people better. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm saying that the entire long-term care picture and how older people are dealt with or make choices for their end-of-life living is something that you need to look into beyond saying we should pay people better. So it's not, and I don't believe that the top up now that you take away when the situation is normal in a year would suddenly make those places deserted and without any workers. It is a particular situation.
What do you think, Althea, that this is sort of something that we just need to consider right now and it's not going to necessarily change everything?
I think there's a lot of changes that are likely to come, but I don't necessarily think they will affect, private companies' ability to pay their own workers. I agree with Chantal. I think long-term care, and frankly, the Prime Minister has said this several weeks ago, that there's going to be a rethink, that he thinks a rethink is required with regards to long-term care homes, whether that means including them in the healthcare system, and that probably means Ottawa forking over a lot of cash to include safer, stronger, public delivered services to our elderly population. I think one thing that has come up very clearly is that we rely so much on workers who do make minimum wage to ensure our health and safety. You think about the people who clean office buildings, who clean buses, who clean hospitals, who clean grocery stores. You think about the food processors who are working basically sometimes shoulder to shoulder, who are not making much money, who often are vulnerable themselves, who may be workers from other countries who come here to work. I think that, in addition to things we've already talked about, like the welfare gap, how is it that Ottawa says $2,000 is what you need to live on, where most welfare payments across this country are less than $1,000? I think that is going to cause a rethink, but it may not necessarily cause a rethink in provincial capitals and in Ottawa. I think the country as a whole is recognizing that a lot of people are in precarious job positions.
What about the other thing that came up around this these benefits this week, and that was Andrew Scheer, who talked about the potential that the cap of $1,000 that you can make if you apply for the emergency relief benefit in some way is discouraging people from going back to work, and that there needs to be some sort of progressive change to the CERB. What do you think of that, Andrew? Is that a conversation that it needs to be had and needs to be had right now?
It's a conversation that needs to be had at some point. It's hard to talk about that right now because there's no jobs for people to go back to. It works in the short term in this emergency situation where we're not concerned with whether people have work incentives because there's no jobs to go to in the short term, and where we're not concerned with the long run cost of it because supposedly this is only for 4 months. But if you're talking about a program for the longer term, people talk about this being the genesis of a guaranteed annual income. Mm-hmm. In the longer term, you want to have much more gradual taxing back of benefits as people start to earn income. If you do that, that means it costs a lot more money, which means you either have to start at a smaller base benefit, or you have to start talking about what programs this replaces rather than just ladling it on top. And if the minute you do that, you start talking about the provinces. So there's a lot of steps you'd have to go before this program enacted for an emergency could be translated into a permanent long-run income where you do have to work about things like incentives for work.
Is that the concern then, Chantal? Do you think that the Conservatives are expressing that this is going to be turned into some sort of universal benefit?
I'm not clear on what the current concern that the Conservatives are expressing really is, in the sense that we will have conversations about issues like that afterwards. But at this point, there are too many uncertainties to say this program needs to be rejigged. As Andrew pointed out, it's a temporary program, 4 months. This program needs to be rejigged because it's discouraging people from working. Well, in hot spots for the pandemic, larger cities, Toronto and Montreal, to name just two, those jobs that their Conservatives are talking about are just not happening. They don't exist. The rest of the country is about to open up, and I don't think very many people are going to say, I can live off for another 2 months at $2,000 a month and not take a job back because this is so great. So I think it's a premature conversation. I also don't think that emergency funding is a solid foundation to rejig social programs in this country.
Althea, about 30 seconds to you.
I don't think the money is the issue. I think the fact that the CERB is $1,000, that allows you to earn $1,000 and still collect CERB is an incentive enough to go back into the workforce and keep collecting CERB. And if you're making more than that and you don't want to go to work, it's probably because you're afraid for your own health rather than money.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. If you want to hear us wildly speculate about something that might be totally out of the realm of possibility, but I'm not convinced, could a federal election be closer than we think? Listen and subscribe to the At Issue podcast on any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/The National. For now, though, back to Andrew in Toronto.
Well, next on The National, can the NHL season be salvaged?
Every dollar is significant.
What it could look like for players and fans and the Canadian cities already eager to host.
We're also seeing in the news about all the frontline workers and the extreme crisis that they're facing with these long hours and putting their own lives in danger. And I just wanted to make sure that people understood how amazing they have been to my family.
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast, Front Burner, the field may be a lot smaller, but the Conservative Party leadership race is back on. We'll catch you up on the campaign. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, no question, lots of Canadians have been missing pro sports, but the NHL has a plan to get things started again. The idea involves a few hub cities where teams would play in empty arenas. And as Brar Stewart tells us, there are already some Canadian cities eager to host.
This is what hockey looks like now that this Burnaby rink has reopened. No more than 5 people on the ice at once, and everyone must stay 3 meters apart.
We can do skill development as long as we have to. And is the one-on-one, 2-on-2 game scenario going to take place? Not for a while.
But the NHL is hoping to be able to bring back the game. The idea is to play out the remaining season and the playoffs over the summer in a limited number of hub cities. Players would stay in hotels and play in empty arenas.
I have written to the head of the NHL as well.
BC's Premier John Horgan thinks Vancouver would be ideal. The Edmonton Oilers have also put forward a proposal, and there's talk about Toronto being interested as well.
In a normal economy, those benefits would not be significant. But in this case, every dollar is significant.
But there are questions around how it will work. Will players have to quarantine, and for how long?
They have legitimate concerns just like you or I do at work.
Sports host Randeep Janda says some NHLers aren't too keen on being separated from their families, but the league wants the revenue, and many fans are sports deprived.
I think people are wanting to watch anything and everything.
Okay, let's go to the Eastern Conference highlights from Game 1 last night.
And this is proof of that. Online, thousands have watched Dustin Nielsen call highlights of a video game. He says as much as he wants to talk about real hockey, he says there's a debate around the benefits of reviving the season given the ongoing pandemic.
If people can't go out to bars to watch games or can't go to the game, I don't know, outside of the rights holders making a ton of money off of advertising, I don't really know how it benefits everybody else.
Well, he isn't sure how many will tune in to hockey in August. For the hardcore fans, it would be a chance to get their fix, even if it means they can't be in these seats to cheer on their team. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, next on The National. An Ontario woman in labor got close to the hospital but didn't quite make it inside. Fortunately, an off-duty healthcare hero was there just in time, and that is our moment. But first, tonight's pandemic how-to guide. As the warmer weather hits, we are going to see more and more mosquitoes out and about. Can they spread COVID-19? After all, they transmit all kinds of nasty things, right? Malaria, West Nile, Zika, and they do this when they bite, although it's more of a poke than a bite. So two things are happening here. One, they suck your blood, but two, it injects saliva to numb the prick site. So yes, if a mosquito is carrying a virus, it can transmit that virus to you through its saliva, but not all viruses.
We have to remember that this is a respiratory virus. There are many other respiratory viruses like influenza and RSV and parainfluenza, and the list goes on and on and on. None of these other respiratory viruses, including the coronaviruses that we know of, are transmitted through mosquitoes. So I think it would be extremely unlikely that this one is.
So if you're worried about this coronavirus, don't worry about mosquitoes. They don't give you the cold or the flu, and they probably won't give you COVID-19 either. They are still pretty annoying though.
We're also seeing in the news about all the frontline workers and the extreme crisis that they're facing with these long hours and putting their own lives in danger. And I just wanted to make sure that people understood how amazing they have been to my family.
CBC Listen. Hear it all here. Download today.
Well, this little girl was born just days ago, not in a hospital, but just outside in her mother's car. And this nurse, Carla Bell, just happened to be there. She was off duty at the time, but when she saw those parents-to-be in need, she swooped into action, and that's our moment.
We were getting closer and closer, and my water broke in the front seat. And we happened to just whip around and make it to the front of the hospital.
I just kind of threw off my coat, put some gloves on, took a deep breath, and just ran up to the car. And as I was there, the baby was just spontaneously delivered. It was just an amazing moment.
She just happened to be there, thank goodness. And she hopped in, and I could remember her like kind of rubbing the baby to keep her warm. And Jeff was trying to get somebody to come get us with the stretchers.
Carla, you're the only one here for this, and step up to the plate and just go do your job.
We were very lucky that everything just happened to go really right. I mean, unfortunately it was in my car, so we're gonna need to clean it, but that's okay.
It's always funny in hindsight, right? So Carla, the nurse, is a day surgery nurse, but apparently 15 years ago worked in obstetrics. Still, she says this was a career highlight. And hey, I guess you just wake up in the morning and you never know what good you're going to do in the world until you do it. That's The National for this May 7th. Have a good night.